All right, welcome everybody. This is Greg Moody and Tracy Thomas here. We're going to be talking about safety in business and how that is profitable for you to be really concerned about making sure you develop safety programs in your business.
Yeah, welcome everyone. And like Greg was saying, we're kind of excited about talking about this topic, specifically to the business owners out there, because we know that, everything from mitigating liability to improving your profit margins by making your work environment a safer and happier place. It's easy. It can be easy to do sometimes, and sometimes a little bit of a challenge, but it's just really, it depends on your approach. So maybe we talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because most people, I think nowadays, know you and I as working with them on their business and helping them with their return on investment, helping them with their marketing and doing business consulting with them. But we met in martial arts. We've been martial artists for 30 years and been in business as martial artists for that long. So we've got a long background in safety and education and safety. So it's really a topic that's close to our hearts, and we really care about it a lot because we know that when people are feeling safe, then they're going to be happier in the rest of their environment.
Well, and your background, it's Dr. Moody. I mean, talk a little bit about your background. For those out there listening in right now, this is kind of an area expertise of his. And go ahead, Greg.
Well, yeah, I mean, the work I did because of my martial arts background, all my work in my doctoral program was in bullying and how that affected both kids and adults. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how that matters in the workplace. And it's really important to understand how that's different from other kinds of conflict. So let's kind of get to it. We've got different kinds of safety issues that we might be covered. And really in our companies and our work that we do training in all of these areas. But it's important for a business owner to understand the difference between the different types and levels of safety issues that they may be having to worry about or encounter. And I think that sometimes business owners just worry about one of them. But we talked about conflict first. And so that means you have to have conflict resolution training. And you might not think you have much of this, but almost every business has quite a bit of conflict. The average employee in a business has 2.8 hours per week that they're in conflict. That's a pretty staggering number.
Yeah, that's a big loss to the company, and it's a stressful environment for the employees and upper management.
Yeah, I mean, number one, as you said, they're losing 2.8 hours a week because that can't be productive. That's not productive time that they're getting out of the employee. But they're also having, that employee is going to be a lot more stressed. They're not going to be as productive. So what we know is when we improve the employee's ability to resolve conflict between each other. Now, this isn't team building. This isn't other kinds of management training. It's just simply helping employees resolve conflict between each other. We know that productivity goes up. And that helps your bottom line. That helps your income. And one thing that Tracy and I were talking about before this podcast was bullying kind of falls in a lot of times with conflict resolution. And we'll talk about this more at a different podcast because it's a big subject. Bullying and conflict are two different things because bullying happens when there's a power differential between two people. So conflict is two people arguing, or conflict is two people not getting along. That's what the 2.8 hours happens in. Bullying, which is kind of a big buzzword in today's society, happens when there's repeated conflict, but it's also somebody that has more power than another person. Doesn't necessarily mean they're a boss that's having conflict with an employee, but it might be somebody that just has more social status in the group. And that happens with adults just as much as kids, sometimes even more in certain environments. So figuring out where that's happening and how to resolve that is really important. And it's a different kind of resolution than the conflict resolution. You can't handle those the same way, because they're two different things. It would be like a good example would be if the United States and China were negotiating. They're two big countries, they can negotiate. But if the United States and let's say Fiji were negotiating, well, the United States can do whatever they want because Fiji is a little tiny country. So there's a big difference in power there. So it'd be hard for a little tiny country to be able to stand up to a big country. So there's a difference in the way you have to handle working for common resolution in those cases. But what's the next step up, Tracy, from conflict that we had just talked about?
Really good conflict resolution, with the bullying in between and goes all the way to the end. Workplace violence, if you're going into the next level,
Yes,
the workplace violence, and workplace violence, it's a real thing. I think the problem with workplace violence is people want to deal with workplace violence when workplace violence occurs. And Dr. Moody knows more than anybody, even as he works with people, helping others work through this kind of stuff, that the workplace violence, if you can take care of this beforehand and people can realize what conflict is and why it's occurring and how to manage it, that really stops it from going to this next level. And workplace violence, we've seen it over and over. There's a lot of very similar signs that you're seeing people go, if you go all the way over to the active shooter, but workplace violence, basically you're seeing a lot of the same signs. And there was telltale signs beforehand. It's just the people in that environment did not see those signs because they weren't it's situational awareness. They weren't aware of those signs. What is the awareness levels? What are those factors? What do they look like?
So workplace violence can escalate. We see workplace violence in all kinds of different workplace environments. Some of the ones that have more violence you might expect, like a hospital tends to have a lot of workplace violence because sometimes people are brought in and they may be in a drug-induced state, or they may be freaking out a little bit because something crazy's happening and people are poking needles in them. Nurses have to deal with violence a lot and be able to protect themselves. But there's all kinds of other professions. The most killed at work occupation is taxi drivers in New York. That's the number one most dangerous job you can have if you're in terms of being killed or murdered. Although that's changing a little bit. The data isn't out really how ride sharing has changed that much. But workplace violence happens across all kinds of professions. And what companies really have to worry about is their liability. We've talked about this a lot in the background here between Tracy and I, but companies don't really realize if they don't have a system in place for handling workplace violence or even know what to do if something does occur. There's just this assumption that, well, we just don't really have any kind of major conflict. We may have conflict in this area, but we don't have anything that's going to escalate to workplace violence. Well, yeah, but what happens if you do? Do you call the police?
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, Greg. Some places are dealing with it when it's happening then, instead of managing it beforehand, because they have a human resources department that's just going to take care of it naturally. But where's the training come into place? OSHA has some very, very gray areas when it comes to this kind of stuff, as far as the verbiage and what they use, like it's supposed to be this way. But if you're providing training to your team, you're mitigating your liability right there by doing the training, and I know that's not necessarily the first thing you want to do, necessarily mitigate liability. You really want your work environment to be safe, which you want it to be safe, and you want them to be able to have, what happens if there's a workplace violence? Yes, we understand that you need to have a route. They need to know what to do, where to go, who to talk to. But really, it comes down to, once again, is seeing the signs of it before it actually takes place to stop it before it occurs.
Yeah, and that doesn't, believe it or not, that training doesn't take a lot, but it is required that it's ongoing, so that it's a little bit in the top of your mind. And we don't want to create an environment that you're always worried about stuff. We want to create enough training so that you can kind of identify stuff before, not kind of, but identify things before they happen, as Tracy said, and look for signs. You want to plan if things happen, but you want to prevent. Preventing things is better. Prevention is better than the cure. And this can be done in this area in workplace violence. And these are major liability issues. So far, conflict and resolving conflict, if you can improve that, is a huge productivity increase. Improving workplace violence is a huge reduction in liability, but also an increase in morale, because people will intercept things before they happen, which is a good return on investment for your company. But then the last thing that I know, and Tracy is an expert at this, is active shooter situations, and this is the more dangerous. This is the most dangerous of these environments, that things would escalate into an active shooter situation, either from a workplace violence scenario or somebody from outside coming in and having a firearm at your workplace. It's the most scary and dangerous situation. It's not very common, but if it did happen, what are you going to do? And Tracy, you're the you've done a lot.
Yeah, and well, Dr. what you're saying right now, I just hit the spot, because people look at it like shark attacks, crashing on an airplane, things that don't happen very often. But what are we doing right now? In today's society right now, we know violence is up higher than it's ever been before. We know shootings are up higher than they've ever been before, ever in the history.
Oh, I think
we have to realize, we're at a place right now to where we have to start making sure that our people and all of our companies, that between Greg and I, what we own, all of our companies, they're trained. We have to keep the training up on this area because we truly believe in this. And it's not just, once again, creating a route. We do have a system that we talk about guard, we talk about situational awareness. We talk about what to do, if something does occur, but also what, prior to that event too. Are your people trained? Do they have a route in place? Do they see the signs? Before workplace violence occurs, when we train a company in workplace violence, what happens is, you heard Greg kind of say it's an ongoing training, because conflict, workplace violent, active shooter, when they're trained, when a company's trained in all three of those, and it's kind of ongoing to where they've learned it over and over, repetitively hit it. What they do is, we see that they stop the workplace violence because they see the signs of it, because of the conflict resolution they had. Okay, so they see what they can do to people by pushing them off to the side. And everybody here that's on this call right now, I know you've watched the news. That there's the similarity of an active shooter is almost always the same, very closely related in how their actions are psychologically. What's occurred to them at work, if it's a workplace active shooter, to where an employee, disgruntled employee, whatnot's come back in. And we know there's a lot of times, very high percentage of times, there's a little bit of an illness there in one way or the other. And what are the signs of that? And what do you do during that time? What is your human resources doing right now? Is your human resources taking care of it, kind of afterwards? In Virginia Beach, unfortunately, we had an active shooter a few years back, and it's horrific. Anybody that's been part of it is absolutely, it's a horrific incident. But the one thing you can't do is take care of it during that time frame. You got to have the training beforehand.
Well, and one thing that people don't realize is, when those events happen, even if it happens across the country or it happens nearby, it doesn't matter. It can make your own workforce have lower morale or be stressed in ways that they're not going to express. I mean, I'm not going to come into work and go, gee, I was worried about the Sandy Hook shooting and worried about somebody coming to my work environment, even though that was with a school. I'm worried about somebody coming into my work environment and doing something. I'm stressed about that. I'm not going to express that because it just wouldn't be normal for me to come into work and say something about that. But it increases stress levels. So what we know is that when these events happen, and they happen, again, not all the time, thank goodness, but they do happen and they're well publicized, it increases stress level for people at work and they relate to it. So when we do training, and just like what we learned 30 years ago in martial arts, when you do training and you feel like you can handle a situation, then it lowers our stress level, and then we can be more focused at work and the other things that we do.
Much more productive. Yeah, exactly. So what Greg was just saying, there's that the liability issue is taken care of, and the productivity, because, and Greg, if it's really, and I know he's not diving deep, he's keeping it in simple terms for us, for people like myself, but it's the mind and what the mind can do to your body at work every day. When you're seeing news and you go to work, and when we do these surveys to companies, and a company does a survey to their employees, and you get 75% to 90% of these surveys that are coming back are saying, hey, the employees don't know what they would do. They feel unsafe because they don't have a plan. They don't have a route. They don't know how to handle. They don't know what signs to look for. Imagine having all of your employees going to work and understanding what conflict resolution is, how to manage it, how to manage the workplace violence, and how to, you have a path, or at least a plan in place. It may not be the best plan. It may not be the best plan because of where you're located in your, a factory versus this or that, or you're stuck in an open room, with an active shooter. There is no best scenario. All there is a scenario that enhances your survivability factors. But having that, Greg, we empower these people, and their productivity levels just rise. The company's ROI is greater, and these people are safe. They're saving their lives, and that's what's important.
Yeah, and all these areas are really important. Usually, when we're working with a company, we talk to a company and figure out where their most important priorities are, and maybe where their weak spots are as well, and then try to attack that one first, and then try to build the rest of the program around them so that they can cover all of these aspects. And sometimes companies just want us to help them with workplace violence, or sometimes the company just wants us to help them with conflict resolution, and sometimes active shooter. And the most common thing, of course, is conflict resolution, because that happens every day, all the time, every week. You get 2.8 hours per week that people are in conflict. Active shooter doesn't happen as much, thank goodness, but it's the most stressful and most dangerous. So really, this whole picture of everything working together is important for business owners to know, because they all do need to be addressed, and being safe will make you more profitable. And that's why we really love helping businesses with these kind of things.
Yeah, and real quick, and as we get ready to wrap it up here, Greg, I think what you just said is so important, because we see so many people going straight for the active shooter. And it's not that it's right or wrong. It's just there's so much more to the training.
Yeah, you mean
when you have that big
straight
picture.
for active? Sorry, but you mean going straight to do active shooter training?
Just straight for the active shooter. Yeah, nothing else.
Yeah.
And then what it is kind of the most advanced level, which rarely happens. And they feel more comfortable maybe with the active shooter training. But what they don't understand is really how it got there. They don't understand that. They don't see the signs, because they didn't go through the conflict resolution training. They didn't go through the workplace violence training. And that it just really works so well when you have all three modules going through your corporation. It could be a small business, even through your company. And your employees and your team, upper management, they all have trained somewhat different, but at the same time, they have everything mapped out for them.
Yeah, and I think even the big thing for today is all business owners should understand that these are three big areas that if you do improve, you're going to be a lot more productive. And we'd love to help you with that if you want us to kind of evaluate where you're at and see. And there's different tools we can use to kind of help the business owners understand where they're at in each of these areas, particularly conflicts, so they know they might be thinking, well, I don't have any conflict in my work. Well, we can help you figure that out in a few different ways, but we need to wrap up today.
Yeah, and Greg, I know we're wrapping up here, but also there's at the end of the year, you're going to see some links to reach out to us and do a free consultation, kind of over evaluation of your business, where you're at. And also, as far as the conflict resolution, workplace violence, we have some books coming out that Greg and I have already written about a year ago, and but they're soon to launch. So if you want to get on the pre-order of those books here, you're welcome to fill out a form and get your name down there for a free book as well.
Yeah, you bet. We'll look forward to talking to everybody later, and we have got some more modules coming up with you. We'll see you and have a good week.
Take care, guys.
Bye.